The village woke slowly beneath the veil of morning. Roosters cried into the mist. Women swept their yards with dry branches and smoke coiled from cooking fires like promises rising toward the sun. Inside her mother's compound, Malaika moved with caution. The air was thicker than usual, not because of heat, but because of change. Fred, her older brother, stood near the door unusually early, stirring the pot she had left for breakfast. He served the children. He smiled too easily, said too little. To an outsider, it looked like kindness. To Malaika, it felt like a rehearsal. She watched him pass Emily a spoon. The little girl laughed, a fragile sound, and Malaika smiled back. But her eyes remained wary. Fred wasn't the type to change, not without a reason. Later that morning, while the children napped and the sun sat high, Malaika made her way to the market. This was their only source of income, as Fred was more of a verbal breadwinner than a practical one. While she placed the merchandise on the stall, Rachel comes visiting. This concerned friend had noticed the shadow clinging to Malaika. There have been rumors of Fred being seen with Zachariah too often. This definitely explains his new attitude, Malaika says. Malaika expressed that she wished she could have done things differently with Daniel. Danny Dan, as she called him. He was her first love and father of her first kid. Unfortunately, Fred and his friends had to beat him out of her life because he considered Daniel as a broken, miserable musician who thought he could sing his way through everything. Although we're still able to see each other in secret, it didn't take long before sickness took Daniel away. Malaika had cried so hard and wished she had died with him, as he was her only source of joy. Unfortunately, she had to live and be strong for their son and her mother, Elizabeth. Rachel listened, her face softening. Still, she offered the practical words Malaika had heard before. Reminders of security, comfort, escape from shame. But Malaika's heart was somewhere else. Later that evening, after the children had eaten and the stars began to bleed across the sky, Malaika sat alone on the doorstep, shelling groundnuts with her mother, Elizabeth. The quiet between them was familiar, not distant but thoughtful. A pause between one breath and the next. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. She told Malaika she had noticed the change in Fred, the money behind his new kindness, and the unspoken pressure around the house. She said she didn't trust Zechariah. That something in her spirit rejected him, like spoiled oil in a stew. But she would not stand in the way. It was Malaika's life and Malaika's burden to carry. What mattered, she said, was that she follow her heart. Not her fear, not Fred's voice, not the weight of other people's shame. She reminded her daughter that she had made mistakes, 3 in the eyes of the world, but it also brought 3 lives into it, and that love, the real kind, doesn't hide behind power. That night, Malaika didn't sleep. She lay with Emily curled against her chest, her other children huddled nearby. Their breath, their warmth, it all reminded her what was truly at stake. Far across the village, under the shade of a mango tree, Fred met with Zechariah once more. Zechariah didn't need to speak much. He simply placed another bundle of money on the table and nodded. Fred accepted it without flinching. He had already decided, and somewhere in the dark, between a mother's warning and a brother's betrayal, Malaika's future was being rewritten, without her. That afternoon, the winds shifted. Elizabeth, strong, patient, and always first to rise, did not get up. Her breath came slow and shallow. Her body, usually quick to motion, now refused to move. Malaika called out. Neighbors gathered, a cart was borrowed, and as the village sun beat down on rusted tin roofs, they rushed her to the hospital, hearts racing faster than wheels on the dirt path. At the clinic, the news came heavy. The bills were high, too high. Medications, fluids, overnight care. Numbers Malaika could not read without tears rising to her throat. Fred stood beside her, arms folded, unmoved. He said there was nothing he could do, that she should go to Zechariah, that the man had power and money, and the will to use both for her, if she would just say yes. But Malaika shook her head. She would not buy her mother's life with her own. Not like that, still. The days grew longer. Elizabeth's condition worsened. And by the third morning, Malaika had run out of both time and options. So she went to Zechariah's house. He welcomed her like a king awaiting tribute. His eyes said it before his mouth did. He would pay the bill, but only if she became his wife. Malaika's voice was steady. She offered to repay him to work for it, but he shook his head. He didn't want repayment, he wanted her. She left without giving an answer. That night she sat in the dark beside a flickering lamp. Her children slept quietly around her, unaware that their world might be about to change forever. She did not sleep. She only watched the flame and thought. And as the first light of dawn cracked through the roof's rafters, she stood, walked, and returned to the man who had waited. She did not speak. She only nodded once, and in that silence her answer was clear. Elizabeth returned from the clinic days later, frail but stronger than before. The spark in her eyes was dimmed but not gone. She smiled when the children hugged her. She held Malaika's hand longer than usual. She said nothing about the hospital bill, neither did Malaika. That afternoon, just as the sun began to lean west, a visitor returned. Zechariah. He did not come empty-handed. He brought bread, meat, new slippers for the children, a bottle of drink for Fred, all presented with the ease of a man used to being celebrated. Fred received him like royalty. He clapped his back, called for a chair, and poured him water before anyone asked. Then, in the presence of the entire compound, Fred announced what no one expected to hear. He said the wedding would take place in a week. He said he was the man of the house since their father passed, and now, he said, it was time for Malaika to become someone else's responsibility. Elizabeth turned sharply. Her eyes searched Malaika's face, but Malaika said nothing. She just stood still, hands tucked behind her wrapper, watching the scene unfold like it belonged to someone else. Zechariah didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He had already won. And then he left, his smile heavy, his footsteps sure. The sun lowered further. Evening came, and with it the weight of unanswered questions. Later, after the compound had quieted and the children had gone to bed, Elizabeth called Malaika to her side. They sat on the wooden bench outside where the moon could hear their thoughts. She asked her what had happened, why she hadn't spoken, why she hadn't refused. Malaika didn't speak right away. Then, softly, she said that she had made her decision. She would marry Zechariah. Elizabeth's face dropped, not in anger but in heartbreak. She wanted to ask more, to protest, to rewind time. But Malaika's eyes were too tired for debate, so instead Elizabeth reached for her daughter's hand. She said she would pray for her, always. She reminded her that marriage, no matter how glittered with promise, is still a cage if entered without freedom. And she whispered what every mother should tell her daughter at least once in her life. No love, no money, no pressure should ever decide for you. Not when it comes to forever. But Malaika just nodded, and for the first time in weeks, she wept, silently, because sometimes silence is not strength, it is surrender.